This guy went on Joe Rogan podcast and then decided to chop someone up. And this Uber driver all of a sudden decided to do a kidnapping. This girl decided to take revenge on her dad's mistress. A decade later, these tenants decided to skip out on rent and take the furniture. And finally, this girl, for some reason, decided to ship nose beers to her house. Let's get right to the wildest crimes people are committing. Starting with number 7, right back at it. Sheldon Johnson, a former gang member turned criminal justice advocate, was arrested following the discovery of a tragic incident at an apartment in the Bronx. Johnson, who once served decades in prison and later worked as a client advocate, had been celebrated for his apparent rehabilitation journey, even appearing on popular platforms such as the Joe Rogan podcast to share his story. However, the events surrounding his latest arrest show that maybe this leopard didn't really change his spots. Officers had been called for a wellness check at the Bronx apartment of Johnson's longtime friend, Colin Small, after concerned neighbors reported hearing the concerning sounds of a firearm coming from the unit. Neighbors also mentioned seeing some guy they didn't know coming and going, carrying cleaning supplies and wearing some pretty bad disguises, which would be incredibly suspicious even without the sounds. So when officers were performing the wellness check, they discovered body parts throughout the apartment, including human remains stored in bins and a freezer. Surveillance footage later revealed that the visitor in the disguises was Sheldon Johnson, who was seen carrying a large blue bin into the apartment just hours before the check. This bin, left inside, held some of Small's remains that eventually led authorities back to Johnson. A former high-ranking gang member, Johnson had once been heavily involved in criminal activities before his reported transformation. Following his release in 2019, he became an advocate for at-risk youth through the Queen's Defenders, sharing his experiences with the public in hopes of inspiring change. He spoke openly about his difficult past, the harsh realities of gang life, and his determination to make a positive impact on the lives of young people at risk of similar paths. As of the release of this video, Sheldon Johnson remains in custody, facing multiple charges. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, including video of him obviously wearing a wig, Johnson continues to maintain his innocence. In court, Small's family said that he and Johnson had a long-standing friendship, with Small even supporting Johnson's reintegration after his prior release from prison. This story is tragic all the way around, from the loss of life of a friend to the reversion of a man who tried to show others that his past didn't define who he is now. Not to mention all the kids he was trying to help, who may now be left wondering if positive change is even possible, or if their own pasts are inescapable. Number 6. Sudden kidnapping. Mark Filanov, at that time an Uber driver from California, got arrested after he trapped 3 women in his car during a ride. They had expected it to be just a quick trip home from a book club meeting, but the ride took a turn, pun intended. The women, who initially assumed it was a standard ride, noticed something was wrong when Filanov started bypassing exit after exit. According to one of the passengers, he became agitated, asking them for the real story, whatever that meant, and even told them they wouldn't make it out if they didn't cooperate. At one point, he even directed the car toward a cement barrier, forcing them to scream out directions to avoid a potential crash. Their fear was building, and one of the women discreetly dialed 911, trying to alert authorities to their situation. After what must have felt like an eternity, the vehicle slowed as it approached a red light. Seeing their chance, the 3 friends bolted from the car, managing to seek temporary safety at a nearby gas station. Filanov, however, didn't let up. He sped off, but reportedly returned the next morning, watching one of the women's homes. Police swiftly moved to investigate the incident, gathering statements from the victims and evaluating available evidence. Not long after, they arrested Filanov on kidnapping charges, setting his bail at $375,000. Uber responded, saying they removed his access to the app immediately and were cooperating with the investigation. Unfortunately, nothing was reported about this case after the initial arrest, so we don't know the results of the trial or what was even going on with Filanov and why he did what he did. That said, this did happen in 2018, when Uber was still gaining its popularity and still finding its footing. Since then, after various incidents and criticisms of its safety practices, Uber implemented new policies. These include more rigorous driver background checks, in-app safety features like location sharing, and the ability to report incidents directly through the app. In recent years, Uber also introduced a real-time ID check to verify drivers and launched initiatives to ensure better response to passenger concerns. Under CEO Dara Khosrowshahi, Uber has aimed to improve its safety record and address criticisms more openly, though some regulatory and safety concerns continue to persist today. Number 5. The Medicaid Home Care Program. Zakia Khan and Hassan Ijaz, owners of 2 adult daycare centers in Brooklyn, New York, are facing serious legal troubles. And yes, we said adult daycare centers, which are a thing we never heard of either. They offer daytime supervision, social activities, and care for older adults or those with disabilities, providing families with support during the day. It seems obvious that these would exist though, right? Anyway, Khan and Ijaz were accused of defrauding a Medicaid program intended to support home care for millions, skimming around $68 million through a series of alleged kickbacks and bribes. The scheme centered around abusing New York's Consumer-Directed Personal Assistance Program, known as the CDPAP, which lets family caregivers get paid to support their loved ones. Khan and Ijaz reportedly ran a third business, Responsible Care Staffing, as a middleman to process Medicaid payments. This setup allegedly allowed them to claim millions for services that were never provided. Joining them in this alleged fraud ring are 5 others, each accused of playing a role in the scheme. With fraud charges stacking up, Khan also faces accusations of money laundering, and all could face hefty prison sentences if convicted. It's crazy how often this stuff happens, right? These taxpayer-funded programs, which provide severely needed services to families, still have minimal oversight and high incentives to exploit the system, and they constantly get misused. And when they inevitably do, some talking head politician says that they're going to reform everything, and then 6 weeks later, it's back to the same old, same old. Number 4. 10-year wait. 24-year-old Eleanor Brown was sentenced to 3 years in prison after a campaign targeting her father's former mistress. Fueled by unresolved anger and aided by her mother and sister, both with ties to law enforcement, Eleanor set out to humiliate the woman her father had an affair with years ago. The crazy thing, or not so crazy thing, was that it was her mother that encouraged her to do it. But Eleanor took it way too far. The affair, which had quietly ended over a decade ago when Eleanor was 14, suddenly resurfaced when Eleanor's mother, Sarah, discovered new social media posts about the woman's family. Why she was looking up the mistress, we don't know, but she was. The lingering resentment led Sarah to send Eleanor compromising images of the former lover, encouraging Eleanor to use them against her. And Eleanor's response was swift and unforgiving. She contacted the woman's husband, sending him the images, and even set up a profile on a questionable website suggesting the woman offered certain services. Eleanor included the husband's contact information, leading to a flood of messages and calls from strangers. And Eleanor didn't stop there. She also messaged the woman's daughter, saying that her mother's actions would always follow her, as if the daughter even knew what happened 10 years ago. Sarah, Eleanor's mother, also faced repercussions. She lost her position in the police force, reflecting how deeply the scandal affected both families. Oddly, Sarah was still married to the same man, so this must have been a fun time for him. As for Eleanor's sister Sophie, she was dismissed from her role with the local police after her involvement in the harassment was revealed. The judge presiding over the case condemned Eleanor's actions as vindictive and selfish, which seem accurate, and emphasized her complete lack of remorse. Her actions left her father's former mistress devastated, with both families now attempting to move on from the fallout of a past relationship that resurfaced in an unexpectedly destructive way. We can't help but feel a bit bad for the mistress's family. They had nothing to do with any of this and got completely dragged into the whole mess for no reason. The father and mistress were the guilty ones. Any anger at family was clearly misplaced. The ultimate lesson here is to look at the father and mistress and remember that we need to be very careful with the decisions we make today because we don't know how they're going to affect tomorrow. It reminds us of a quote from one of our favorite movies, Magnolia. We may be through with the past, but the past is never through with us. Even after a decade, bad decisions still can ruin lives. Do you think Eleanor was justified in what she did? Did her mother manipulate her into doing the dirty work? Or was this just a case of a mom venting about a painful event and it spiraled? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Number 3, 18 children. Tracy Ashbridge, a former HMRC worker, basically the UK's IRS, and her husband Robert were involved in a major fraud scheme that left authorities confused. Tracy fabricated claims for 18 non-existent children. They only actually had 4, pocketing substantial government benefits. She even joked with Robert via text, asking if they should have another child for more benefits. When he questioned how they'd handle it, she said, "Not physically, LOL." Between 2015 and 2019, Tracy funneled over £300,000 through 9 different bank accounts, exploiting her position at HMRC to manipulate claimants' records and funnel extra money her way. Robert, a chef, wasn't directly altering records, but prosecutors argued he encouraged Tracy's scheme. Together, they led a comfortable life funded by the fabricated children and false claims of severe disabilities within their household. After their arrest, authorities found cash at their home in different currencies, totaling over £7,000. Though Tracy attempted to claim nearly £500,000, she admitted to 6 fraud charges and was sentenced to over 2 years in prison. Robert, facing an 18-month sentence, received a suspended sentence with mandated rehabilitation. During the Proceeds of Crime Act hearing, it was revealed the couple had no assets left from their fraudulent gains. Despite benefiting by hundreds of thousands, Tracy and Robert were ordered to repay just £1 each due to their lack of assets. However, if they come into any future wealth, they may still be required to repay what they gained illegally. The operative word being may, right? Judge Gavin Doig made it clear, saying he hoped not to see the couple again in court, which he probably won't, as they were laughing their way out. Seriously, Tracy got 2 years and Robert gets to stay home? And they don't have to pay back anything after legit faking 12 kids? How does that even work? It's almost like that judge told Tracy she'd get paid £300,000 just to go to prison for 2 years. We've never been to prison, so we can't say if we'd take that deal, but would you? Tell us in the comments below. Number 2, double pain. Rohan Devanji, a landlord, was left with a hefty £20,000 bill after a tenant's elaborate scam wreaked havoc on his property. The tenant, who used a stolen identity to pass background checks and went by the alias Poonam Grover, had different plans for Devanji's Canary Wharf apartment in East London rather than just living there. Grover sublet it on Airbnb, hosted wild parties, and then vanished with Devanji's furniture. But the damage didn't stop there. After the tenant moved in, neighbors reported frequent parties at the flat, eventually tipping Devanji off to the scheme. Devanji confronted the tenant and demanded they leave and remove the Airbnb listing. Instead, he found himself locked out of his own property, and a man named Asad, claiming to be the tenant's brother, now occupying the space. Soon after, CCTV caught multiple men leaving the building with Devanji's belongings, including a sofa and washing machine, loaded into a yellow van parked outside. Legal action became the only option, and after months of court proceedings, a judge finally ordered the tenant to leave and pay what they owed. However, this tenant didn't bother to show up in court, dragging out the process and leaving Devanji to cover the repair costs. When he finally regained access, he found the apartment trashed, broken glass, damaged furniture, and even essential appliances missing. To make matters worse, Airbnb users continued to book the flat, completely unaware of the scam they had walked into. Devanji even tried booking his flat on the platform to verify that it was indeed being sublet, only to be asked for a security deposit by the third-party company that had listed it. Despite his efforts, including changing the locks multiple times, the tenant and accomplices continued to return and empty the apartment piece by piece. By the time Airbnb took down the listing, the damage was done. Devanji had lost months of rent and thousands more in repairs, all while juggling legal battles and managing his property's recovery. It's crazy to think that this tenant basically managed to get away with the whole thing, right? We're all for protecting tenants, but The fact that this guy managed to continually return and steal everything with no consequences whatsoever shows that there's clearly something wrong with the system, and landlords should be protected too. Number 1. The home delivery. Quanisha Menego, a woman from South Carolina, got in some serious legal trouble after a significant discovery at her home. Authorities intercepted a package reportedly containing over 6 pounds of illegal substances en route to her address and set up a sting. Following a tip-off, local deputies, alongside federal agents, tracked the suspicious parcel originating from outside the United States. An undercover officer made a controlled delivery to Menego's residence, where she accepted the package and placed it in the backseat of her Ford Focus, unaware of the operation surrounding her. Just as she prepared to drive away, authorities moved in, quickly arresting her. Inside the package, officers found 2 hefty bricks of nose beer, weighing to approximately 6.5 pounds, with a street value exceeding $180,000. The coordinated efforts of local law enforcement and federal agencies meant the package was intercepted before it could reach the streets, with officers determined to trace its origin. Of course, Menego got hit with the usual charges. It's pretty crazy that Menego would have this amount of contraband shipped directly to her house of all places. We are obviously not into that sort of life, nor are we criminals, but it just seems like a bad idea to have something like that sent to where you live. Click to watch one of these next videos.